Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on one of the toughest parts of making music, how to get a mix that sounds clean, powerful, and totally professional. Does that sound familiar? Yeah, if you've ever felt that frustration, you are so not alone. It's probably the number one thing that holds producers back. But the good news is, the solution isn't some kind of unobtainable magic. It's all about understanding and taming one specific area of your sound, the low end. Okay, let's break this down. Over on the left, you've got all the classic signs of a mix that's just not there yet. It's muddy, the bass is kind of all over the place, and instruments just seem to disappear into this sonic fog. This happens because of something called masking, where all those big, powerful, low-frequency sounds just pile on top of each other and compete for the same space. But the Pro Mix on the right? It solved that puzzle. Every single instrument has its own spot to shine. So how do we get from the left to the right? Well, it all starts with understanding the battlefield, and that means we got to get familiar with the frequency spectrum and learn the language that producers use to describe what they're hearing. This right here, this is the foundation of your entire track. The low end is what gives your music its power and its weight. But, and this is a big but, because it holds so much energy, and the sound waves themselves are physically really long, it is by far the easiest place for things to get crowded and completely out of control. So here's kind of like a map of that sonic territory, all the way from that deep, rumbling sub-bass up to the sparkly highs. But honestly, just looking at these numbers, it only tells you part of the story. To really get what's going on, we need to connect more descriptive words to them. This is exactly how engineers talk. When they say a mix is muddy, they're not just guessing, they're pinpointing a very specific problem area, usually a traffic jam of sound right around that 250 to 450 hertz range. Learning this vocabulary is like learning the secret language of sound itself. Okay, so now that we can actually name the problem areas, we need the right tool for the job. And in the world of mixing, your number one sculpting tool is the equalizer, or as you probably know it, the EQ. Now with an EQ, you basically have two main moves. You can boost frequencies to make them louder, or you can cut them to make them quieter. And look, boosting is great for making things you already like sound even better. But the real pro mindset, the place you should almost always start, is with cutting. Why? Because by removing the frequencies you don't need, you're creating clarity and space for everything else to breathe. Think of it like this, right? Your electric guitar part, it probably doesn't have any useful musical information way down in that sub-bass rumble. So by using a filter to just chop all that off, you're not actually hurting the guitar's tone one bit. But what you have done is you've created a clean, empty pocket of space for the bass and the kick drum to live in. You're basically preventing that muddy buildup before it even has a chance to start. This is the million-dollar question, right? Sometimes you just know a guitar sounds a little honky, or a cymbal is painfully harsh. But how do you find that one specific frequency that's causing the issue? Well, the pros use this awesome surgical technique that honestly anyone can learn. It's called the search and destroy method, and trust me, it's a total game changer. It's incredibly simple. First, you just grab an EQ band and create a narrow but really big boost. Then you slowly sweep that boost across the whole frequency spectrum. And as you're doing this, you're listening, you're hunting for the one frequency that just jumps out and sounds terrible. Once you find it, you just flip that boost into a cut, and just like that, the problem is gone. Now, the thing that controls the precision of that cut is a parameter called the Q factor. Just think of it like this. A high Q is like a surgeon's scalpel. It makes a very narrow, very precise cut, which is exactly what you want for the search and destroy method. A low Q, on the other hand, is more like a butter knife. It affects a much broader range of frequencies, which is perfect for more gentle, overall tone shaping. Okay, so we've got the basics down. Now let's look at a couple of more advanced techniques that pros use to solve some really common problems, like that classic battle for space between the kick drum and the bass guitar. So instead of using an EQ to just carve a permanent hole in your bass sound, you can get way more clever with something called sidechain compression. This is so cool. It basically makes the bass automatically duck its volume for just a millisecond every single time the kick drum hits. This creates this perfect little pocket for the kick to punch through the mix without you ever sacrificing the overall tone of the bass. It's a dynamic solution to a dynamic problem. And we have all heard this one, that piercing, distracting sound in a vocal track. That's called sibilance, and it tends to get even worse after you add other effects like compression. The solution is a special tool called a de-esser, which is basically a compressor that's smart enough to only target and tame those specific harsh frequencies. A lot of modern EQs can even do this now, giving you that same surgical control. You know, while all these tools and techniques are incredibly powerful, they are pretty much useless without the single most important piece of gear you own, your ears. Mixing isn't just a technical exercise, it's an act of critical listening. So what does it even mean to listen like a pro? Well, it means checking your mix everywhere, in your headphones, in your car, on your cheap laptop speakers to make sure it translates. It means constantly comparing your mix to a professional track that you love to keep your perspective in check. And this one is huge. It means making your EQ decisions in the context of the full mix, not in solo, because the whole point is to make everything fit together. I love this quote from Nail the Mix. It really gets to the heart of it. The technical part, actually cutting a frequency, that's easy. The real skill, the part that takes practice, is training your ears to identify what needs to be fixed in the first place. And while you're on that journey, this piece of advice from iZotope is so important. This is a creative process. It's about feeling and expression, so please don't get bogged down trying to be technically perfect. Give yourself the grace to learn and just experiment. So if you take one thing away from all of this, let it be this. Your goal is not just to make things louder. Your goal is to be a sonic sculptor. You are carving out a unique space for every single sound so they can all exist together with power and with clarity. By understanding the low end, using EQ as a surgical tool, and most importantly, by listening critically, you can absolutely transform your mixes from muddy to magical. The tools are there, the knowledge is yours. Now go create something amazing.